for the candidates who are on the ballot for the Democratic primary for Congressional District 21. Before we begin tonight, I want to remind everyone to turn off all electronic equipment. My name is Barbara Thomas of the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. I live in the city of Saratoga Springs, and I will be your moderator tonight. This event was co-organized by the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County and Citizens Acting Together for District 21, or CAT 21. The League is a nonpartisan, volunteer political organization dedicated to the informed and responsible participation of citizens in government. The League never supports or opposes any political party or any candidate. That has been the League policy for the entire length of our existence, 98 years. Membership in the League is open to anyone who is eligible to register and vote, whether male or female. CAT 21 is a group of citizens in the greater Glens Falls area working together to raise awareness on issues relevant to the District 21 community and to increase citizen involvement in the democratic process of our nation. I realize that many of the people in the audience tonight may have strong views. However, I will insist that the candidates and the audience treat each other with respect. I also ask the audience to hold its applause until the candidates finish their closing statements. The job of the audience is to listen and to ask written questions. You may use the forms that are provided this evening. They are red cards, sort of. There they are. Raise your hand and a runner will bring you one of those forms. Please indicate your name and if you live in the 21st District. Most questions should be directed to all candidates. However, if a question is directed to one candidate, the other candidates may respond as well. Note that we may not have time for all questions, and I think we already have loads of questions. Our question vetting staff is ensuring that the questions with the most interest get asked first. They may combine some questions for efficiency and to avoid repetition. They will also make sure the questions are clear, readable, and contain no personal attacks or inappropriate language. Obviously, you can help them by avoiding those things. Note also that we will not accept questions after the opening round of prepared questions from the moderator. I'll give you a warning. Candidates are asked not to distribute campaign literature, but it has been placed on tables just outside the auditorium. And I would ask everybody to remember that this is not an event for campaigning in the auditorium. So no hats, pins, signs, demonstrations allowed inside or outside the building. I will mention that there is an online voter guide on the lwvsaratoga.org website. Just click on the big blue button for pictures and information about all of the candidates. The timers for this evening's event are in the front right there at that table. And they're going to hold up cards for the candidates to glance at. So candidates, remember to glance at them. Green means 1 minute left, yellow means 30 seconds, and red means your time is up. I'll remind you, you don't pay attention. Tonight's event will be divided into 4 segments. First, each candidate will give a 2-minute opening statement. Second, I'll ask 3 previously prepared questions, each with a follow-up question. And the candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer the question, and then another minute in the follow-up period. And we'll go in the same order that the question was asked. And then we'll take the written questions from the audience. And then the candidates will give a 1-minute closing statement. The candidate for tonight in alphabetical order happened to be seated in alphabetical order: Tedra Cobb, Emily Martz, Patrick Nelson, Dylan Ratigan, and Katie Wilson. Note that Donald Moynihan's name is still on the ballot, but he has withdrawn to run for the Assembly. So when you go to vote, keep that in mind, that he is not running for that position. Okay, now we're going to start with the 2-minute opening statements. And they've drawn the lots, and Tedra is going to be the first person. You're on.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I'm Tedra Cobb, and the 21st Congressional District isn't just some area on a map for me. It's made me who I am. It's been my home for over 30 years. I went to school at SUNY Potsdam. I raised my children here. I started my business here, and I served in the St. Lawrence County Legislature. As a mom, a volunteer firefighter, an AIDS educator, and a healthcare activist, I know and love the people of Northern New York because I share our hopes and struggles. We stand at a crossroads. Are we going to stick with the incumbent and wait and see? Or will we be an active voice in our story and in our future? I say we act. We need to replace Elise Stefanik because she's voting in ways that hurt us. If you are raising children, if you are caring for elderly parents, or if you have a struggling business, you know that 3 years is literally a lifetime of harmful votes, and we must change course now. She voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a replacement, jeopardizing our hospitals, clinics, and nursing homes, raising costs, and cutting off access to vital services, along with destroying jobs. She voted to reverse protections that safeguard our streams and rivers. These votes make no sense given our ecotourism and our farming economy. I could talk about my experience and what I bring from a life of public service, but I'm here tonight to listen to what's on your minds. Thank you so much.
We're going to save some time by not having any applause until the very end of the program, about 9 o'clock tonight. Okay, next is Emily Martz.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you all for coming, because it shows what I know, which is that our Democratic Party is stronger and more unified than ever. Because of people like you participating in the democratic process across the district and across our nation. The biggest question that I'm getting now is, how are you going to win in November? And the answer is always, we are going to win because we have to. We have no choice. Democrats, Republicans, independents alike are tired of a representative who's sponsored by corporate lobbyists and brought to us by billionaires. We are going to win because we are united. We are going to win because the democratic values of compassion, opportunity for all, and hard work deserving fair pay are American values. The issues that matter to our district, healthcare, Social Security, jobs, these aren't Democratic or Republican issues, these are North Country issues, and we have a real opportunity here. If we put forth a candidate with vision, who's practical, pragmatic, like I am, with a long, strong track record of working across the aisle to create good jobs, new markets for our businesses, we will win in November. And we will join a long track record of amazing races, national, local races, where Democratic candidates stepped up and said, if you tell me that the hurdles are too high and the chances are too low, I'm going to do it anyway because I know that together we can win and together we can get things done. I'm Emily Martz, and I ask for your vote on June 26th so that we can win in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we will hear from Patrick Nelson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and being an active participant in the democratic process. It is your government, and you are the ones who are in charge. And by being here tonight, you are stepping forward to make your voice heard so that we know how we're supposed to do our job. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and Cat 21 for putting on this amazing event and giving us the opportunity to address your issues. The experience that brings me to this point, running for the House of Representatives, is an experience of thousands upon thousands of doors knocked on, thousands upon thousands of phone calls made, not just as a candidate for this office, but working with local campaigns and the previous 2 congressional campaigns. Nobody has spent more time talking with the voters and the people of this district across the partisan spectrum and listening to their concerns. And I can tell you that they are sick and tired, we are sick and tired, of a political establishment in Washington, D.C., and a financial establishment in Wall Street that runs a government that does not work for us. We are sick and tired of government by $2,700 campaign contribution instead of government by and for the people. The time has come. The stakes have never been higher. If we do not get off fossil fuels as fast as humanly possible, we risk the legacy of our species. If we do not transition away from this culture of rabid individualism and screw you, I got mine economics, the legacy of our country and our society is at stake. It's time for us to stand up and fight for our values, the true American values, and as someone who has spent the most time in their life getting to know the people of the 21st District, the values of the people of the 21st Congressional District, and it's those values that I want to bring to Washington, D.C. on your behalf. I'm Patrick Nelson. On June 26th, I ask your vote to work for you in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and next will be Dylan Ratigan.
Hi everybody, I'm Dylan. It's nice to see my colleagues once again at one of these forums. Katie, nice to see you. Patrick, you're looking well. Feeling good? Tedra, Emily, a pleasure. Thank you for putting this on. Why run for Congress? How many people in this room think that I would, if you elected me for Congress, I could fix what's going on? Anybody else? You want to fix everything? Think you can fix everything? Anyone? Katie? No. So what are we doing? Why is it that 2/3 of the population, on average, doesn't participate in any single election? 90% don't participate in the primaries, and even in the biggest presidential elections in our entire country, the largest voting bloc is people who don't participate. It's because there is a certainty that monopoly power, as Patrick described it, has taken over both wings of our government to the point where there is almost no sense of influence over or power over what happens. And not a single one of you is willing to raise your hand in the belief that any person on this stage, if you elect us, is going to be able to fix these problems. And you're right. And you're right. And so what are we going to do to fix this? Because we are in a crisis. The world is shifting faster than it ever has, and the government is completely disconnected and at odds with the interests of the people of this country. 3 out of 5 people in upstate New York are at or below the poverty line. I grew up and was raised in 40 below, I feel like I'm in Florida right now, I'm from Saratoga Lake. I come down here, I'm like, oh, it's so nice. It's nice to be in Miami. It is nice. The only possible thing that is available to us is take an inventory of where we are, measure where we are today, and focus on how we are going to work as individuals and as groups to solve those problems, beginning with reforming our government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ratigan. And next, we will hear from Katie Wilson.
Thank you. So for many decades, we have been doing the same thing over and over. We've been sending the same kinds of people to DC with very similar experiences, very similar resumes, wonderful, service to their communities on local levels. And yet, look at where we are. Nothing has changed. Right now, we have an opportunity, a very real opportunity, to send someone to DC and to put someone up against Elise Stefanik, who has a different background, who has intimate knowledge of the struggles that people face in a district where the average income is only $27,000 a year, where children are scouring dumpsters on Fridays because they know that they're not going to have enough to eat over the weekend. Now, I don't know if that's happening right here in this town, but that is what it's like in much of the rest of this district. That's what I'm familiar with. Every year, 435 people go to DC, and they're all fighting over the same little pot of resources. And what we really need right now is someone who can negotiate for us, someone who can represent us. And it's true, no one person can save New York 21. But what we can do is drive the conversation. What we can do is make sure that the conversation is focusing on the real issues that we experience here in our day-to-day lives, where people leave the house early and come home late, many of whom work multiple jobs and who are struggling. And those people are going to be voting. It might not be all of them, but there are going to be plenty of people voting on the 26th and even more in November. And we have to put someone up against Stefanik who can inspire trust and hope amongst that demographic here in New York 21. That's why I'm running. I'm running because I understand what it's like to live and work here at a certain income level. And I'm here to advocate for all of those people like me throughout this district, and everyone else too.
Thank you. Okay, now we are going to move to the questions that were prepared jointly by the League of Women Voters and Act 21. And the candidates are going to have 1.5 minutes to respond to the question. So we're going to start with Emily Martz. And the first question is, what policies do you believe would best help the constituents of District 21? And if elected, how do you plan to advance those issues in Congress?
I'm pausing because where do we begin? Having been neglected as a rural district for so long. And that is where I start. To think about our district, which is rural, which is low income, which has been neglected by developers. And I don't mean the kind of developers that are going to kill our environment. I mean the kind of developers that will help with our economic prosperity and to help with our quality of life, which is already phenomenal. And so, in the first vote that I hope I get to cast is a vote for Medicare for all. Because that will help our people, and that will help our businesses. That will help our local governments who are drowning under the high costs of health care, particularly for their retirees, upwards of 30% of their budget. I will also hope that the second vote is for broadband. I may have a chance to tell you the full story tonight, but I met a new farmer who is working hard for his business, and when I first asked him, what do you most need from me, he said, infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. Took me to the top of his grain tower to show me where he gets the best cell coverage. That's not the way we expand our economy. So my first vote, Medicare for all. My second vote for infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Patrick Nelson.
So for me, it comes down to building coalitions in finding win-win scenarios. Of course, a member of Congress can go down there and try and bring as much pork back to their district without caring how it affects everybody else. But you're going to be much more effective if you're finding areas that benefit everyone. So two particular coalitions I want to put together. One, the Northeastern Coalition regarding climate change. So we're losing farmable land in this country over the next 15 to 20 years. But in the 21st Congressional District, we're likely to see a longer growing season. That means greater demand for agricultural products out of the broader 21st Congressional District. But our infrastructure is nowhere near where it needs to be to keep up with that rising demand. So do we need it here? Yes. But so do people in Connecticut, and in Rhode Island, and in New Jersey, because the constituents in every one of those states, just like ours, like to eat. And we are going to be supplying much of that food in the next 15 and 20 years. So it's not just to our benefit, but to the benefit of the region. The other coalition is a coalition between urban and rural representatives. We have huge housing pressure in urban areas as people flock to the cities looking for economic opportunity. It drives up the rent. If we build connectivity in rural areas, like our district, that is faster than currently exists in the urban areas, we get an infrastructure advantage that helps grow our economy, but it also allows people to reverse that trend from upstate to downstate, moving back into rural communities, and it helps lower the rent in places like New York City and elsewhere. So everybody can benefit from that kind of investment, and that's the kind of member of Congress I want to be.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to hear now from Dylan Ratigan.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What policies do you believe would best help the constituents of District 21? And if elected, how do you plan to advance those issues in Congress?
Thank you. So if you don't measure anything, you can never know where you are and you'll never get anywhere. I don't know about you guys, but I can't imagine anybody in this room who's in a business of any kind where they don't measure anything. Whether it's measuring the number of customers you have, the cost of supplies that you buy, the number of readers that you have, it could be anything. The U.S. Congress and the House of Representatives is literally the only job that I know in the entire world where there's no accountability, no measurement, no clarity, and no goals. It's why politicians, along with the gerrymandering and all the rest of it, can keep their job 90% of the time with 10% approval ratings. So my explicit suggestion is that we initiate a district dashboard that I call the 21st and the 21st that specifically measures jobs created, percentage broadband access, percentage access to healthcare, revenue per tourism, revenue per agriculture, actual health and quality of our environment. Because if we are not actually measuring anything, how are we ever going to work together to go from where we are to where we want to be? If you don't measure reality, you can never change it. As a matter of policy in Washington, D.C., the leveraging of both the capacity to create a massive infrastructure bank for this country to move to 100% renewables, which is on the table right now, the use of antitrust law to break the monopolies that have a stranglehold on our government for policy on both sides of the aisle in order to actually advance things like Medicare for all are a couple of the policy ideas that occur. Regardless of policy, you can measure in advance.
I would be immediately supporting Senator Chris Murphy's plan, which is a Medicare buy-in on the open exchange. It allows people, anyone, to buy into Medicare and creates a bridge from where we are to where we want to be, which is a Medicare for all. But it's realistic in the fact that we can pass it now. We must do something right away. And we have to be realistic about what we can do in the time that we have. We have to start helping people immediately. That, of course, is going to help spur the economy as well. We definitely need an infrastructure spending program. We have the oldest pipes. We have some of the oldest water systems in the state, and it's contaminating our lakes, rivers, and streams. It's also keeping, when you can't see it, it's harder to get excited about, but that would put people back to work. It would help lift communities up. We also need, I'm in full support of Gillibrand's Family Act. We are one of only 3 countries in the world that still does not offer paid family leave, where you can lose your job because you have to care for either a newborn, an aging parent, or a sick relative. These are things we have to invest in right now. The other part of infrastructure would certainly be broadband. We have to meet people's basic needs. We have to create an environment in which young people actually have the services that they need here. That's why they're leaving and going to the cities. I am, part of a young family, and upon coming back here, I looked around and I thought, okay, there was no broadband, no cell coverage, there's no local transportation. What do I do with this? And so many areas in New York 21 are like that. They're lacking hospitals, they're lacking the basic services that families need to thrive.
Thank you very much. Tedra.
Okay, so when I look at the district, I think about what is holding us back. And first and foremost, it's healthcare. It's the cost of healthcare for small businesses and large businesses. And it has an impact on our schools. The percentage of our dollars that go to schools that go to healthcare costs are educational dollars taken away from our children. So first and foremost, it's healthcare, and making sure that everyone has access to healthcare through two good programs that have Medicare for All. Those are options that are on the table, and I'm open to looking at those options. Beyond that, we need to look at healthcare in terms of access to healthcare. We need to make sure that we are safeguarding our Perkins loan grants, make sure that we have a public service loan forgiveness that is being chipped away at the administration right now. It makes a difference when you're a teacher and you have invested in an education and then you don't have enough money to pay that loan, but you are serving your community. We have those opportunities here. We need infrastructure, we need broadband, we need cell coverage, we need roads and bridges fixed. I do not want a wall in Mexico, I want a bridge to Canada. I cross it regularly. And without it, I can't get my goods and services there. And guess what? In Plattsburgh, their business and their economy will be destroyed. We have to invest in the infrastructure that keeps us moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we're going to have a follow-up to that round of questions, so we're going to go in the same order. And what we want you to answer is, why do you believe you are the best person qualified to make the changes that you advocate? And we're going to do that again with Emily Martz. What? Oh, 1 minute.
These are the two Medicare for All infrastructure bills are my two choices because of my visions for our district, which is that we can be a model for other rural areas that are also reviving. We can be a model based upon clean energy, and we can be a model so that 10 to 15 years from now, more of our students are staying because they can find good jobs here. And that is going to take healthcare. That is going to take broadband. And I know this is possible because I've already done it. My history in the North Country is a history of working with businesses, working with local governments, regardless of party, to bring us the resources, to create the plans, to help us get those good paying jobs, those family sustaining jobs. And the farmers I met was one example. There's a hub on the hill where these farms now come together in order to have new markets in New York City and Saratoga Springs that they never had before. And there are extra farms there because of the program I helped put together.
Okay, the next person, Patrick Nelson.
So the first part of it comes from my technical background. I'm formally trained in biochemistry and biophysics, and there's a huge lack of technically trained members of Congress that can evaluate data and understand the trends. That's where the first 2 points came from, was from a scientific understanding. And second, it comes from my ability to find areas of agreement and have tough conversations with people you don't always agree with, but to have them with empathy. My first experience in advocacy and in activism was working for marriage equality in the Presbyterian Church, where I worked at the national level working on a constitutional amendment to define marriage as a union between two people rather than one man and one woman. And I've had those intimate conversations, and people hold their faith so dearly. And it's not that they don't care, it's the connection to their identity that those values had for them. But I've worked in those situations. I've had those conversations. And I've had the ability to persuade, to meet people in the middle, and to do so with empathy, with love in your heart, and to find areas of agreement that you might not otherwise have.
Thank you very much. Dylan Ratigan next. Sure. Why do you believe you are the best person qualified to make the changes that you advocate?
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. I'm firmly of the belief that our government is broken. I believe the voters are completely disconnected from the government. I believe that's why 90% of the time the person's reelected, 10% approval ratings. I believe that our economy is functioning in a way that is designed to remove resources from upstate New York and has been for decades. That's why 3 out of 5 of the people who live with us here are at or below the poverty line. My prior experience is in economics and in political corruption. I'm the author of a New York Times bestseller on solutions to political corruption. I was the host of a program that directly confronted our government, both our Senate, our House of Representatives, and for that matter, the executive branch of our government, for its corruption. I'm the founder of a group that is now in the hundreds of thousands that's focused on reforming campaign finance. And if you believe that political corruption and economic corruption is part of what ails us, I have multiple decades of success in both of those areas.
Thank you very much. And now, Katie Wilson.
So I'm a pragmatist, and we all know that as a freshman member of Congress, there's only so much you can do. But what you can do is drive the conversation. What you can do is refuse to roll over when business as usual continues to occur. We see that in this race. You know, just because it's the way things have always been done doesn't mean that's the way you should be doing them, or that it's the right way to do something. And what I see happening time and time again throughout history is people sort of trading up their friends for a new set of influencers and power in DC. It's like they're auditioning for the DC cocktail circuit instead of remembering who got them where they are and fighting for the people who are in the most need. And that is what I am doing, because my children are here, my aging parents are here, the land that I own is here. This is my home and my heart, and I'm going to fight like hell for all of the people of New York 21.
Thank you. Tedra Cobb.
Yeah, I come to this question, and I started out with healthcare because my background is in healthcare. I worked doing HIV and AIDS education when people lost their homes, lost their jobs, were not treated, and then I started a community health agency for people who were uninsured so that they could access healthcare. So when I talk about healthcare, I come at it from that experience. But I also come at healthcare as a small business owner. My husband does solar installation. Last year our premium was $13,000. This year it's $15,600 with a deductible of $10,000. That's another employee. So I come at that with that experience and knowing that we could invest those dollars into a business and hire more workers. And finally, as a legislator, I work very hard to cap Medicaid. In those days, Medicaid did not have a 2% cap every year, and now we have a cap. And that has an impact on us being able to limit our property tax. So I come at it from those kinds of experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, and it will be directed to Patrick Nelson first, and everybody gets a chance. If you should win the Democratic primary and run against Elise Stefanik, what specific votes, actions, or inaction has Congresswoman Stefanik taken that you believe make her vulnerable in the 21st Congressional District?
So over her career, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has taken more than $200,000 from healthcare industry political action committees. From that funding, she decided to vote to take away the health care of between 60 and 80,000 of her own constituents, myself being one of them. Congresswoman Stefanik has been one of the largest beneficiaries of funding coming from hedge funds and Wall Street. Her primary financier is actually Paul Singer's group called Elliott Management, which specializes in vulture capital, which is about the lowest of the low in the finance industry. I'm sure you agree, Dylan. And now she has voted with them against the American people to risk our entire economy falling into another 2008 recession. She voted for a piece of legislation that would regulate Discover Bank at about $200 billion, the same way we regulate Boston Spa National or Glens Falls as a community bank. And that is because she is in the pocket of the 55% of contributions that she receives from corporate political action committees. When push comes to shove, Congresswoman Stefanik, we will side with her donors against the 21st Congressional District.
Thank you. Okay, and now Dylan Ratigan.
So Donald Trump's the President of the United States. Did anybody hear that? Oh, no, seriously. Donald Trump's the President of the United States. And the political party that's appointed to actually curtail the fact that Donald Trump is the President of the United States is the Republican Party. So the checks and balances of the American government is such that the Republican Party, if a lunatic, madman, narcissist, maniac down the line becomes President of the United States, well, guess what? We have a political party who will intervene and say, oh goodness, this seems to be disastrous, self-destructive, and annihilative to everything that we've built over the past few hundred years. I think maybe we should step in and do something. Well, one of the members of that party represents this district, and they're not doing their job. And there's a tremendous amount of risk right now. And the reason this specific person is not doing their job is because they are the definition poster child of a career politician who has never worked a real job in their life. This is someone who came out of college and went into the DC establishment machine. She is a party asset. To run against her for her enabling of the most dangerous leader in the history of the free world while empowering the war machine and doing a litany of things that Patrick could easily lay out for us, from banks to healthcare. That alone is reason for her to be defeated, and it's why she will lose. She is a party asset. She is a party insider. She is a tool of the establishment empowering this president at the expense of the American people. She will lose.
Thank you, and Katie Wilson.
I believe very much that what got the ball rolling here was her healthcare vote. But I want to also remind everybody that she was whipping votes on the tax bill, and she will not get away with that. People know that that bill is not only terrible for so many, but also particularly bad for second homeowners, which is only going to cause taxes to go up in a state where taxes are already incredibly high. Every time Stefanik votes to cut something from the federal budget, we pick it up on the state and local level here in New York. And there's no one on any side of the aisle that appreciates New York State taxes. Furthermore, and some people think that this is kind of a partisan thing, but Stefanik was part of overturning the stream protection rule. She voted for acid rain. And even if you are on the right, you know that our natural resources are a huge part of our local economy. And that is something we can also nail her with. But all of that aside, what's really happening here is every door that I knock on, people are aware, people that I wouldn't expect are paying close attention. You know, we are targeting demographics that are not the same voters that most people on this stage are knocking on the doors of. And they are aware that A, she's not from here, B, she's really cozy with Paul Ryan and very much a part of the establishment, and C, isn't showing up. And in an area like this that is incredibly tribal in a way, people are not okay with an outsider representing them in DC.
Thank you very much. And Tedra Cobb.
I think the opportunity that we have now that we did not have in the last two elections is actually Elise Stefanik's vote. Her vote to gut the Affordable Care Act, kicking 64,000 plus people out of their health care, closing hospitals, nursing homes. We've all gone over that. But she also recently voted to gut the Americans with Disabilities Act. Who does that? I have a brother who has lupus, and it took me 2 years to fight for him to get Social Security disability. Many of us in this room have probably experienced something like that. Elise Stefanik does not live here. She does not understand the needs and challenges. She has not advocated for a parent or a child or a sibling. That is what we have now. Every single vote that she has under the Congressional Review Act that has undone environmental regulations. Dumping in streams. She's voted to undo labor regulations that protect people. These are the votes that we are tallying up right now. This is the opportunity that we have right now that we did not have in the last election cycle or in the election cycle before. We have those votes, and we also have her lack of presence here. She just had another teletown hall. She cannot bother to come to the district. She does not deserve to serve us.
Thank you. Okay, Emily Martz.
Healthcare, environment, her lack of a willingness to vote on the NRA. These are all pieces of legislation that we can and that we must hold her accountable to. And I promise you that after June, I absolutely will. What is also essential is us. Us. This is a moment in our nation that is bigger than our individual campaigns. It's bigger than us as individual candidates. This is a time when our party must come together to stand for something. Before I was a candidate, I worked to unify the progressive groups around our district. And we must now unify again around our Democratic nominee, because that is how we are going to win in November. So after the primary, I will host a summit similar to the one that I hosted about a year ago, where we will bring together Democrats, progressives, volunteers from all of the campaigns to organize to win in November. I know it's going to be hard, but that's exactly why it has value. We are at a moment in our nation where we could be a model for the rest of the nation for unifying Democrats. This moment in our district doesn't come around often, and we must unite because that is how we win.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to move to the follow-up question to that. So we'll go in the very same order, starting with Patrick Nelson. And that is, what is your message to Democrats as to why you can reach District 21's Republican and independent voters better than the other candidates running in the Democratic primary?
Well, number one, I'm not going to do something that politicians often do in these situations, which is they run as a progressive in a primary, and then they pivot to being a centrist in the general election. People see that coming a mile away. Now, throughout my work in this district, in 2 general elections, and now as a candidate, I've talked to those Republican voters. I've talked to those independent voters. When I asked them, do you think every citizen in this country ought to have health care as a right? 90% of the time, yes. The district is waiting for someone to advocate on things like Medicare for all. The people are ahead of where some of us as Democrats actually are, and they're waiting for us to arrive. So it's by running on our bold values, it's running on solving real problems, and it's on running on kicking the bums out of office and getting rid of a corrupt Democratic establishment that is symbolized by Congresswoman Elise Stefanik and her 55% war chest that comes from corporate political action committees. That's how we win.
Thank you very much. Dylan Ratigan.
Since my candidacy is based on the effort to repair a broken political system, reform, to restore fairness in the name of justice, those issues have no party. Those issues have no tribe. You ask a Republican, what's the biggest problem in America? They say it's big government. You ask a Democrat what they think the biggest problem in America is, they say big corporations. The reality is giant corporations have a stranglehold on a large, opaque government. To repair the system that I really should say to reform the system, to confront the stranglehold that exists between big corporations and big government is not a left-right issue, it's an up-down issue. And that is an issue that we can move forward collectively on. When you look at the foundation of my own economic and political reform expertise, it seems to be working well with a lot of our campaign volunteers, half of whom are independents and Republicans right now.
Thank you very much. And Katie Wilson.
How many volunteers is that? That's what I thought. Okay, because here's the thing. We actually, 21% of our active volunteers, and I'm talking people who are donating, knocking doors, making phone calls, hosting events, doing outreach in the communities, are independents and registered Republicans. That's 1 in 5 of our volunteer base. And I have the Working Families Party endorsement. I have Bill McKibben's endorsement. I have 350 Action endorsement. I mean, I am not, a super moderate Democrat. But I can hang there. My strength is my paradox. I'm from the North Country. I understand what it's like to grow up with a certain set, with a framework like so many people up here do. And my message is very similar to Dylan's, except I'm not focusing on the system as much as I'm focusing on the people being affected by the system that's corrupt and broken. And that is what is going to reach people, because people need a message of hope right now. People need to be able to trust in someone to advocate for them and actually create some change. And that's why I know we have a real shot at taking on Stefanik, who's going to be really hard to beat.
Thank you very much. Tedra Cobb.
Yeah, when I ran in 2002, I ran as a progressive against the largest dairy farmer in St. Lawrence County, who called me hippie, and well, I was sort of, and he called me that girl, and he was dismissive, and I won. And when I went door to door, the biggest issue at that time was term limits, interestingly enough. And what I said to people was, I will term limit myself. I will run twice, maybe I will run 3 times. I ran twice. I served for 4 years, and here's the thing. I ran unopposed the second time because I lived my values. I lived my values as a progressive legislator who was working on health care and education and Office for the Aging and all of those things, and I ran again in a conservative district unopposed. When you serve your community as a public servant, and this is where local government comes in, people know that you are true to your word, and they will hold you accountable by voting for you or against you.
Thank you. Emily Martz.
The day after the 2016 election, I, like most of you, woke up in shock. But I felt then that there was a role that I had to play, and I started to figure it out that morning. I was on my run and passed a house, coming to a house of someone whom I knew voted for Trump. And I challenged myself to stop and talk. And I realized through that brief conversation, which was very emotional, that indeed both of our emotions were running high, but that we both wanted the same thing. We wanted to be able to take care of our family, to know that hard work's going to pay off, and to keep our country safe. And because of that conversation, I at every turn have sought the difficult kinds of conversations with the people whom I know think differently, because that is essential to serving. It matters to people that they know they're being listened to, and people want to matter. They want to know that you are trying to understand where they're coming from, and that is why I love public service.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have one more of these prepared questions, and we're going to start with Dylan Ratigan. So listen up. The Democratic platform for the 2018 midterm election is known as a better deal.
I didn't hear the beginning of that. They're laughing at me. Try that again.
The Democratic platform for the 2018 midterm election is known as a better deal. What does that mean exactly in terms of policies, priorities, and proposed legislation?
You asked me to define the Democratic Party's platform for a better deal?
Yeah.
Their talking points from the Democratic, I have no idea. I can tell you what I think a better deal is. Would you like me to do that? But I haven't read the Democratic Party's better deal. Sorry.
Okay, so, sure.
So I can't answer that question because I'm not familiar with the Democratic Party's better deal. But what I can do is I can tell you that any better deal is impossible if you have a government that is in the situation the one that we're in, and then every single thing that we want, whether it's Medicare for all, whether it's access to public education, whether it's funding for public education, whether it's the environment that we want, go down the list. I'm a Democrat for the simple reason that it is the only political party of the two that are available that ultimately aspires to equality for all people. That's why I'm actually a Democrat. And as far as a better deal is concerned, most of it is political pablum made to placate the masses while retaining power inside of both sides of the aisle in Washington, D.C. But if we actually measure what we actually want and actually work together to do it, much can be achieved in the similar vein to the pragmatism of my friend Katie. If you do not address the underlying issue, which is the disconnection between our government and our people, not a single thing that you want will come to bear. You can rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic as much as you want. It is time to actually reform and reconnect the voter to the government, and I apologize for not reading the decrypt talking points before arriving this evening.
Okay, thank you. The next person is Katie Wilson, and the question's the same.
I don't need you to repeat it. I actually did. I read most of it about 6 months ago when it came out. I wasn't impressed. And I was not. I thought, we have an incredible opportunity right here. We have an opportunity. We've been set up in such a way that it should be so easy as Democrats to be obviously in a position of helping people, to make people understand and see that there is a much better alternative out there, and yet we failed. The D-trip has failed. And I'm not a fan of the D-trip either. I was unimpressed. I thought to myself, we need to think bigger. We need to actually get to the root of some of these issues. And Dylan's right. I mean, in a lot of ways, if we don't tackle campaign finance reform, we're not going to get anywhere. It comes back to the same old with people auditioning for the DC cocktail circuit. You go into DC and you forget who you are and where you're from. Because suddenly you're rolling around with a whole new crew of people with a lot more influence. You're raising money and making friends so that you can get reelected in a couple years. You're constantly on the phone across the street in a little office begging people for more money. You're looking for the next, well-dressed though, that's for sure, and probably well-caffeinated. But you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not focusing on what's so important right now. And if the party continues to be so tone-deaf and not reach people on a personal level, we'll continue to lose. And I feel very strongly that this moment, and I've talked to so many candidates across the country, it's our job as candidates to connect with people. That's what we're here to do. That's how we can win.
Thank you. Tedra Cobb.
Yes. I actually remember Nancy Pelosi announcing the better deal, but I actually don't remember what was in the better deal. But as a Democrat, I do know what our core values are. And that is that we fight against income inequality. It is that we care about health care and education. It is that we care about our elderly and our sick. It's that we care about our friends and our neighbors. That is why I chose to be a Democrat, and I believe are our core democratic values. The problem to me, and what I'm hearing from other candidates on the stage, and I think probably lots of us in the room would agree, is that there's a disconnect from what's happening in Washington and from those core democratic values to what we get every day. We are seeing that income inequality increasing every day. We're seeing a tax bill that was passed in the middle of the night with hen scratching. We're seeing an undoing of our civil society. That is what we are seeing. We're seeing families torn apart at the border. Those are not core democratic values. So whatever the better deal is now, we have a chance, when we get elected, to create the values that we bring to Washington to take care of each other. That's why I'm running for New York 21, to bring those values to Washington.
Thank you. Emily Martz, please.
I don't know what's in the better deal either, but what I do know is that a better deal for New York 21 is a new representative to start with. And I do know that a better deal for all of us are policies that will work to narrow the income inequality gap that is destabilizing our society, and is exactly why we have the president we do. And then one of the places I'd like to start is education. And I know that's on the minds of Democrats, Republicans, independents. My 10 years as a professor taught me that we have some of the best and the brightest and the most creative minds in our nation. So we deserve the best resources, the newest technology, and the best training for our teachers. Our public schools in our communities are the bedrock and the foundation of our communities. But with Betsy DeVos and Elise Stefanik, who is complicit in her work, they are attempting to slash billions of dollars from our public schools, which would affect our schools here in the North Country. And our teachers deserve better pay. Our teachers deserve the best training. And our students deserve the best that our country can give them. Because education, that is the ultimate equalizer. And any money we put towards education is an investment in our district, it's an investment in the future of America.
Thank you very much. Patrick Nelson, please.
So the 2018 Democratic Party platform is a better deal, better jobs, better health care, better wages. And some consultant and staffer at Washington, D.C. got paid a whole bunch of money to come up with that. Boy, wouldn't we love that job. But here's 5 words that the Democratic Party has advised candidates not to use in their campaigns or in their advertising. 3 of them, Medicare for all. 2 of them, single payer. Why? Well, they tell us because if we do that, we'll be going too far left and we'll risk losing elections. That's not why they're doing that. They know that if we put Medicare for all and single payer on the platform, we will win elections, and then Democrats would be forced to enact that policy. And then the cozy relationship that's been formed between the health insurance industry and the Democratic Party would be lost. And there's a lot of people making a lot of money writing cheap slogans that are on the payroll of that health insurance industry. We need to reform the Democratic Party and take it back to the party that held the House of Representatives just about every Congress, from FDR to Ronald Reagan. And that's when we were New Deal Democrats. That's when we had solutions that everybody paid into and everybody benefited from, and you could understand it didn't take 2,000 pages of legislation to enact.
Okay, thank you very much. I feel a little uncomfortable with this follow-up question, since nobody really cared about a better deal. However, the question is that many people collaborated on, and I am going to ask, do you believe a better deal is too far to the left, too far to the right, or strikes the right balance? And we're going to start with Dylan. And you can say anything you want for this minute. 1 minute.
I have not read The Better Deal. I need to make this is a serious moment, and we need to. This
You might as well use your time effectively.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What's the theoretical question? Doesn't matter. Politics, by its definition, plays on emotion. It plays on a desire, it plays on hope, it plays on fear. It plays to manipulate the emotion of human beings for the accumulation of power. That's what politics is. And when you have a stable society with limited risk, having a traditionally dysfunctional political system, which is every government in every country ever in the history of the world, doesn't really bother that many people that much. It's not where we are right now. Emotional manipulation and slogans and traditional language about left versus right have gotten us where we are today. We must step up and do more with reform.
Thank you. Katie Wilson.
So I woke up this morning in Watertown, recorded a radio bit, drove through Lewis County, dropped off some yard signs, arrived in Saratoga to do TV, went to the library to get some work done, went canvassing in Glens Falls, and then came here. And so instead of pontificating for 30 seconds for no real reason, I'm just going to say that I don't think it was neither too far left or too far right, it was just a bad deal.
Okay, thank you. Tedra Cobb.
I don't think that we as a group of people care what we call the better deal or the new deal or the old deal. I think what is important to us is how we are treated by the government and by our representative. In other words, I think unfortunately that vision that we are lacking in Congress right now leaves us wanting. It leaves us wanting a representative who is present, who is working on these issues. And this gets me to the previous question, and I'd like to talk about the opportunities that we have as a congressperson who is driven by constituents and cares about you. In other words, we could have a congressperson, like many of you are lucky in this room to have, Paul Tonko, who is thinking and listening and collaborating and working in Washington on your behalf. That's what I hope to do in Washington on behalf of all of my friends and neighbors in New York 21.
Before you go, Emily, I just want to ask the audience, if you still have a question that you want to get into the mix, to hold it up. This is your last opportunity to get a question in. Okay, while they're doing that, Emily, you can go ahead.
The candidate that's going to win in November is not the candidate with the Democratic or the progressive, the Republican or the conservative ideas. It's the candidate with the ideas that will best serve the North Country. It's the candidate who demonstrates that she understands what we in the North Country need. And what we in the North Country need are jobs. And I know politicians say that all the time, but there's a reason people are leaving our district. And it's not the lack of quality of life. It's not our tight-knit communities. It's good family-sustaining jobs. It's good businesses that young people can start. And if you haven't read about the Chainsaw Carver, I encourage you to go to my Facebook page, go to the Sun Community News, and read about him. Because I helped to put together a program that builds resources and helps small business entrepreneurs grow their markets so that they can actually make that their living and support their family. And an artist who was struggling went through the program, and now he supports his family. Those are the ideas that will win in November.
Thank you very much. Patrick Nelson, please.
So here's what the Democratic Party message should sound like in 2018. And you need to tell your friends this that call themselves fiscal conservatives. The United States is 4th highest in the world in taxpayer spending per person on health care. The only countries ahead of us are Norway, Sweden, and Luxembourg. The tax and spend countries with single-payer healthcare programs like Canada and Australia spend $3,300 per person on their healthcare system. That covers everyone. The United States, as taxpayers, we spend $4,800 per person, and we can't manage to cover everyone. And we spend another $5,000 out of our own pocket on top of that for the least efficient and most expensive healthcare system in the world. Congresswoman Stefanik is being wasteful with your tax dollars when it comes to healthcare, and she is turning the Treasury of the United States over to the pharmaceutical and the health insurance industries as we continue to pay more and more and more money. You cannot be a fiscal conservative and not be in favor of Medicare for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we are going to move to the next section where we look at all these questions. We probably will not get through all of them, but there are more coming, so we'll see how that works. Each of the candidates has 2 red cards, so they can add 1 minute to their response, or respond to something that another candidate said. And red cards can only be used during this question period and not during the closing statements. So we're going to start with Katie Wilson.
How long do we have to respond?
You have, I thought you did.
1.5.
What do you say?
1.5.
1.5. Okay. I don't see that here. Okay, fine, 1.5, just like you've been doing pretty much most of the time. So this question comes from somebody in the town of Monroe, and it's about health care. With the latest move by the Trump administration, what will you do to protect those with pre-existing conditions? Do you believe health care is a right or a privilege? And please explain your understanding of Medicare for all. So Katie, there you go.
Well, this latest play, if you will, is perhaps one of the most devastating, and I think it even caught a lot of Republicans by surprise. But it would essentially leave 52 million people without health care coverage. And in this moment where we see the rise of Lyme disease spreading like an epidemic, with the mental health issues we're dealing with, and so many other, I mean, almost everyone has a pre-existing condition these days. I mean, this would be perhaps the greatest attack on access to health care ever. And this is why I have been, for the last year, championing Chris Murphy's Medicare buy-in on the open exchange. You would not be able to be excluded from pre-existing conditions. Anyone could buy in to the Medicare system. It would shore up the Medicare system by having more people participate, and it would all be accomplished without anyone telling you what you have to do, which is often the biggest complaint from the other side. They don't want to be told what they have to do, they just want to be able to have a good option on the table. It would also help drive costs down across the board because it's so competitive. And if you combine that with the ability to negotiate prescription drug costs, you have a healthcare system that is a no-brainer. I mean, this is something we can do now while we fight for a Medicare for all system. So that is why we have to attack this issue head on. That is my proposal.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie.
I think
Tedra Cobb?
I think the question was, what do you plan to do to stop the president? And the answer is to win. That is the only answer. Because if Elise Stefanik remains in power, I hate to use that word, but that's what it is, remains in her position, and the rest of the Republicans remain in their positions, we will not be able to stop this president. This election comes down to that this president, despite the rules and regulations, will break them. That's what we're facing. And so the option that we have is to win. Now, the other part of the question was which Medicare for all, and quite frankly, to me, it's the principle and not the plan. The principle is that every person should have access to health care, portable and affordable. Whether it's the House plan or whether it's the Senate plan, to me, it doesn't matter from where I stand now. What matters is getting to Washington and working with people who are looking at those plans and doing something that Congress is not doing now, which is holding hearings. That is their job. They are not doing it. So we must win, and we must hold hearings, and we must then create the best plan driven by the principle that every person deserves portable and affordable access to health care, and they deserve to be treated with dignity.
Thank you. Emily Martz.
Not only do we win this race, but we call our friends all across the country to make sure we win the other 119 House seats back. To me, Medicare for all, the importance is that all pre-existing conditions are covered. There are no pre-existing conditions. And that it's a graduated premium. The reason Medicare for All is so important to me is because we are living in a tale of two Americas with healthcare. On the one hand, you have my uncle who developed melanoma. It metastasized to his lungs. He's in remission, and throughout the process, his family was not financially destitute. And then on the other hand, you have my good friend's late husband who lost his job, thus his health insurance, and he was showing signs of heart attacks. But he didn't go to the doctor because he knew that would leave his family in financial hardship. And finally, my friend convinced him to go, and he dropped dead at the hospital intake. That is not okay. That is not the world that I want to live in. I do consider healthcare a right. I do consider it a public good. When one person lacks it, we all suffer. And that is a moral and an economic truth.
Thank you. Patrick?
Principles are wonderful, but the devil is always in the details. In this case, it's our lives that are in the details. I don't believe we're going to win elections by pulling up short on Medicare for All and offering a buy-in. Physicians for a national health care plan oppose the buy-in because they are afraid that it will become a dumping ground for the poor and the sick. And a buy-in system can only work if we bring back the individual mandate, which was the least popular provision of the Affordable Care Act. The American people don't like to be told what they have to do. They don't like being told they have to purchase health insurance. That's why with a Medicare for All single-payer system, we're not telling you, you have to purchase health insurance. We're asking you, are you an American citizen? You have health insurance. That's the difference between healthcare being a right of citizenship and healthcare being a product that you are expected to purchase. I believe that healthcare is a right, and I don't believe half measures are how we're going to win and take back office. It's time for full-throated support of moving to a Medicare for All system, not a better version of the Affordable Care Act, but something new, something different, and something that will work for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dylan Ratigan.
This is the best example that I've seen of how broken our political system is. The president was a Democrat, the Senate was run by Democrats, the House run by Democrats. Everybody wants to talk about health care. It was finally the time. They had an opportunity to at least put a public option in the bill. No resistance, no political barriers, nothing. Didn't do it. Decades in the making. And they can't break the private health insurance monopoly. Not the drugs, not the health insurance, none of it. The obvious answer, which has been reached at dozens of countries around the world, is if you are a citizen, you have health care. We already do it for everybody in this country over 65. We already do it for every veteran. It's not a mysterious concept. It is a political choice made because the people who profit from our sickness and our death pay our politicians on both sides of the aisle. And unless you actually call it out and reform the Democratic Party, you will never have the obvious solutions that are available to each and every one of us. The most damning and disgusting of which is the failure of the Democratic Party to provide health care when they had total control of our government, even as that had been their rhetoric at the time. But when the rubber met the road, they folded in the face of health insurance and drug money.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is... Okay, Patrick, go ahead.
I want to follow up on the repeal of the individual mandate because this is an example of the pernicious thing that happens when you have people that hate government in charge of your government. Repealing the individual mandate is causing health insurance premiums in this state to skyrocket by 24%. This is an example of what Elise Stefanik's Republican Party does, which is they take something in government and they break it. And then they point to the thing that they broke and said, look, government can't solve your problems. It's the same thing with the VA. We have 40,000 staffing vacancies in Veterans Affairs that Congress refuses to fill. Because if the VA functioned like it's supposed to, they wouldn't be able to point to it and see, hey, look, the VA is broken. You want single payer, that's what it looks like, and it doesn't work. Well, we see through that, and it's time to have a Democratic nominee that's willing to stand up to a Republican Party that keeps breaking our government.
Okay, and Tedra wants to use her red card.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about principles, and that is this. That when you're driven by a principle, you listen to somebody else and you solve problems. And I don't think that listening to other people is being disrespectful. I think it's being respectful and open, and that's the opportunity. We would not be where we are now. We can all pick apart the Affordable Care Act. It was a travesty on many levels. But here's the thing. Right now, in the United States, people are ready for Medicare for all. Why? Because we had something that didn't work as well as it should have. People are opening up. Business owners are saying, you know what? I want that. We need that for our business. Listen, I got a kid who has a pre-existing condition. She has had back surgery. She has celiacs. I'm here right now running because Elise Stefanik has turned her back on all of us. But the reality is this. The principle is that we need to make sure that everyone has health care. And what it looks like right now may not be what's in Congress right now. That's the point. That's the point of hearings. That's the point of elected people doing their jobs. Getting professionals and experts in the room, not passing legislation in the middle of the night, and not just saying, I'm only going to do this and absolutely nothing else. Then we're stuck. There may be a better plan. I don't know, but I'm open to listening.
Okay, Dylan Ratigan wants to use his too.
The reason I become so frustrated with the Democratic Party is exactly what Patrick just said. They accept an answer for health care that is to mandate that everybody in the country purchase private health insurance from an unreformed monopoly that pumps more money into that private monopoly than we put into the bailout of the banks. And we're supposed to accept an atrocious answer to a question which by its very definition enables the Republicans to go through the theater that Patrick describes. The Republican Party should be easy to defeat. They are openly and brazenly predacious upon society without any concern. What does it say about the lack of focus and clarity and courage and integrity in the Democratic Party that they are not able to come up with ideas that are more resonant than a party that runs on social predation? These little decisions where we decide we're not going to do anything with the private health insurance monopoly, we're just going to make everybody buy from a monopoly system and jack up their prices. These are the very solutions that create massive liabilities in the decades that follow, and it is the reason the Republicans are in power right now. I think actually everybody understands that at this point, honestly. Medicare for all is the answer, it's just a matter of how hot the room has to get.
Your time on your red card is... Thank you. Okay. I'm going to combine, or actually put a whole bunch of questions because the topic is gun reform and guns, money in politics. The first person to answer this would be Tedra Cobb. What is your opinion regarding the large number of school shootings? What common sense policies do you believe can be put in place to help prevent school shootings? And how are you going to convince upstate gun Second Amendment supporters to vote for you if for a Democrat? And have you taken or will you take money from the NRA? And would you support an assault rifle ban? So all these topics on gun safety.
I'm assuming those are lots of people's questions all...
Yes, it's actually two.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I wear this orange ribbon because I want to own the issue. In other words, Elise Stefanik is going to run on her pride of having an A+ with the NRA. If we don't own the issue, all of us on this stage, and say there is no light between Elise Stefanik and us with regard to the Second Amendment. This is not a Second Amendment issue. This is a gun violence issue in the United States. Gun owners and non-gun owners alike agree that we should ban bump stocks, that we should not allow criminals to buy weapons, that we should have universal background checks with no loopholes. They agree. We agree. Why can't it get done? Because of money, power, and fear. We can talk about what? The public health and the violence, domestic violence, and gun issue. We can talk about all of that, but the reality is what's wrong with this country is money, power, and fear. That people are driven, and we've been talking about it all night, by the money, by the NRA, by lobbyists, by power, by keeping our power. Senator Rubio could not even answer the question of a young boy who asked him, would you stop taking money from the NRA? And Senator Rubio couldn't even say no. Money, power, fear, the fear of not being reelected, the fear of living your values and integrity and protecting your children.
Thank you. And Martz.
There used to be a time when politicians would put out on their Facebook page, my thoughts and prayers are with you. And now to read simply that, especially from someone like our incumbent, is disgusting. This is a time when politicians like her are using that as a cover because they are too weak to stand up to do what they know. I hope they know in their heart is right. And it is because of the NRA. And it is because of representatives like Stefanik, who run a win-at-all-cost campaign. When I'm in Congress, the three main gun safety protection pieces of legislation that I will support are universal background checks at the federal level. If you've beaten your wife, or if you've committed a violent crime, you've lost your right to own a gun. And military-style weapons belong only in the hands of the military. And these are three ideas, even the last one, that the majority of Republicans, the majority of even NRA members, get behind. We just need the political will to do it. And we can get someone to Congress who has this by bringing to the table and being willing to talk about these difficult conversations like I have been doing. And I'm willing to.
Patrick Nelson.
So one of the things I love about these forums is we get a chance to listen to the evolution of messages from all the candidates. I remember when I was the only one speaking out on Medicare for all and single payer, and now we're all there. I remember when I was the only one talking about not taking corporate PAC and lobbyist money, and now we're pretty much all there. And I remember recently being at 2 consecutive forums, being the only one with the courage to speak out and call for a federal ban on assault weapons. And now, I think we're pretty much all there. And it's a testament to what the democratic process and what your voices have been able to accomplish. With what Emily said, absolutely. In addition to that, if you're on the terrorist watch list, you shouldn't buy a firearm. We should not have this concealed carry reciprocity proposal that violates the 10th Amendment rights and gives greater gun rights to Texans visiting New York than New Yorkers, and takes away the autonomy of New York to decide its own safety legislation. If Congresswoman Stefanik wants to make it easier to conceal carry in New York, she should run for the New York State Assembly, the New York State Senate, or run for governor. But it is not Washington, D.C.'s role. So no, I will not take money from the NRA, because I don't take money from any corporate activist group, and that's why I'll be able to work solely on your behalf when it comes to these issues. And the final thing is, let's not draw the circle too close when it comes to school shootings. We're talking about mass shooting incidents, and we can maybe talk, we're not going to place armed guards at every downtown street corner, in every nightclub, and in every theater. When somebody shows up with one of these rifles trying to commit harm, we've already lost. Let's make sure they don't have the rifle to begin with.
Thank you very much. Dylan Ratigan.
Remember when I said the decision not to provide a public option for healthcare was one of the greatest examples of our broken political system? The ability to buy a AR-15 at Walmart, drunk, and use it any way you want is better. The solutions are obvious. Patrick really just summarized, I think, our collective position, whether it's the assault weapons ban, whether it's bump stocks, whether it's magazine cartridge sizing, whether it's the refusal to even do the obvious scientific research, although I don't know why we would need that much scientific research. I think having loaded guns, this is a pretty, there's enough anecdotal evidence to suggest having high-performance weapons that are loaded with extra bullets tend to increase risk. But if we need to study that, so be it. I think that politically, we're at a point where we have the greatest opportunity we've ever had to actually solve for this. I don't think we have to convince each other this needs to be solved. And I still believe that the leadership on that issue that's being provided by the students at Parkland is different than anything that we've seen before. And the greatest thing that all of us can do is stand behind them and drive this message and make them feel as much support as humanly possible in the process. Have you noticed, Patrick, I'm doing like this left hand thing? It's like a Bill Clinton thing. I didn't even do this like 2 months ago. As I'm sitting on these panels with you, and all of a sudden I felt like this. Anyway, I've used enough time.
Okay, thank you. Katie Wilson.
I'm going to level with everybody here and not dance around this issue like politicians usually do and like some people on the stage are. There's a reason why Tedra is supported by Moms Demand Action but won't say she supports an assault weapons ban. There's a reason why Pat only came to that conclusion a couple weeks ago. There's a reason why Emily wouldn't actually say the words but indicated that she does support one. Right now, well, first of all, in New York, we live under an assault weapons ban. And yet, my children's school was threatened not that long ago. The young man who threatened it was found in Plattsburgh with ARs in the back of his car. He simply told them he was on his way to turn them in and they let him go. There are more threats. Moriah had a threat. I mean, I can rattle off 10 schools that had a threat with an assault weapons ban. Columbine happened under the federal assault weapons ban. That is not, there is no, and excuse the pun, it's not a pun, but there is no silver bullet answer for this issue. It is larger than anything we've really had to tackle. We do have a culture of violence. There's so much more that we have to do. It is about fear and power and money. It is about emotions on both sides. It's fear of loss of life, it's fear of loss of rights. It's so emotionally charged, and yet we have to figure out how to keep our children safe. There's so much more that we have to do than have this one conversation about whether we need a federal assault weapons ban. We need to address poverty. We need to make sure that children have resources. The FBI did a study that showed that the easiest way to keep children safe on campus is to have suicide prevention counseling. I'm getting cut off. We have to have this conversation. We have to have it honestly and openly and not dance around it for political reasons.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is from somebody from Glens Falls. And it's about economy banking practices. And the questioner says, a recent article in the Post-Star mentioned that certain banks are using redlining to economically partition areas of the Adirondacks. What do you know about this, and what is your position on the practice of redlining?
I look forward to reading that article. And
Emily Martz.
whoever did submit that question, please let me know after the forum what article in particular that is. Because redlining is a way to diminish a particular group or a particular area's ability to get a loan, which restricts that person or that area, that group of people's ability to reach their full potential, to have economic prosperity. There was a recent bill in Congress that has gotten a lot of attention, which is the bill that that rolled back some of the Dodd-Frank legislation. There was a part of that I fully support, because what I know of the challenges that face our small businesses. And that was the part that allows the smaller banks to have looser lending guidelines. And that's so important in our district because it was hampering small businesses' ability to get a loan. It was hampering the small banks' ability to fully service our communities so that our communities can invest. And these community banks, when they get a dollar, they're much more apt to keep that dollar in this area rather than the big banks where it goes out. So yes, there were some parts of that legislation that we need to keep a careful eye on, and that's why I want to go to Congress as someone with a banking background.
Thank you. Patrick Nelson.
So if I were to tell you that South Carolina in 2018 has the most segregated school system in the country, would you believe me? If I were to tell you that Louisiana in 2018 had the most segregated school system in the country, would you believe me? If I were to tell you that Alabama had the most segregated school system in this country in 2018, would you believe me? Well, you were wrong all 3 times. The state of New York has the most segregated school system in the United States in 2018, and it is a direct legacy of redlining that kept people of color in low-income communities. And by the way, we fund our schools with property taxes, so those people that are redlined in the low-income communities get less funding for education and less chance to rise above their own station, which is supposed to be the American dream. So we need to eliminate redlining as a practice in the United States. And we need to punish harshly anyone that uses racial or economic animus to select who is allowed to live where in the community. If you can afford the house, you should be able to purchase it. And we need to decouple, I know this wasn't the question, but we need to decouple our education funding from property taxes so that education, instead of exacerbating income and wealth inequality, becomes the great equalizer that it's supposed to be.
Thank you. Dylan Ratigan.
Redlining is the tip of the iceberg. Our entire financial system is designed explicitly to remove resources from places like upstate New York systematically. In fact, that system was enhanced and made more efficient after the financial crisis in 2008. That system was enhanced and made more efficient again in a recent vote by the Republican and the Democratic Party in our Congress. The way your financial system is structured is the definition of your country. If your government enables a financial system that is designed to remove resources from the people of your country is doomed to increase fear, anxiety, reaching for guns, reaching for opioids. Pick your favorite social problem. If your banking system is not only designed, but mandated to invest and drive resources into communities, the stress and fear associated with the absence of basic resources diminishes, and the social ills associated with that stress diminish with it. Our banks are given special status in our country. A chartered bank has specific rights and access to capital that no one else in the world has. They must obey rules as a result, and right now they make those rules, they do not obey them.
Thank you very much. Katie Wilson.
Can I genuinely ask you to repeat the question, because I think
Sure.
that this might be getting at something bigger than we're really responding to.
A recent article in the Post-Star mentioned that certain banks are using redlining to economically partition areas of the Adirondacks. What do you know about this, and what is your position on the practice of redlining?
Well, I'm actually not aware that that's occurring around here, but it's certainly something that I'd like to take a much closer look at. We know that it's wrong. What I started to think about when I heard you ask the question initially was the way that resources are distributed in the park are unfair. You know, we see Governor Cuomo doing a great job, when he feels like it, throwing lots of money at economic development problems and issues, and yet there's never really a clear plan of accountability or, clear benchmarks on how to make sure that these large sums of money are actually creating opportunity, and they always go, and they most often go, to the same places. And so how do we redistribute wealth? How do we make sure that, similar to the question posed here tonight, people have equal access to the resources available? I mean, that is exactly what we're talking about right now on a macro level. You know, we are not a poor country. We are one of the wealthiest. And yet people are struggling. People don't have health care. People's basic needs aren't getting met. Children are going hungry. People don't have access to a good education by and large. If they do, they're in debt for as long as they can, you know, stay alive most times. Most of us are one big medical bill or an accident with a car away from either losing our home or going to debt, or perhaps much worse, being out on the streets.
Okay, thank you. Tedra Cobb.
Yeah, I think that this gets to the issue overall. I'm sorry I didn't read the article. All the post-star people here, sorry I didn't read the article, but it gets to the larger issue to me about income inequality, which we have not seen the likes of since before the 1920s and into the 1920s. The income disparity and inequality has gotten larger and larger over time, and here we are. How many of you have backpack programs in your schools? How many of you remember 10 years ago, did we have backpack programs in our schools? No, we didn't. Backpack programs, for those of you who don't know, are programs given by the schools that are run often in the schools, sometimes by not-for-profits, sometimes by teachers raising money or parents, for kids who go home in the weekend so that they have food. So the backpack is full of food for the weekend. That's what we're talking about up here. It's not about racial inequality all the time, it's about income inequality. It's about how we treat people who are low income and struggling. I was doing work at United Helpers, a nursing home, and there was a woman there who was paying a taxi to get to work so she could work, and she did not have food to eat. Do not buy into that poor people are lazy. This government cuts SNAP and believes that poor people are lazy. They are working hard. And programs that don't help the poor get out of poverty, that's what's wrong with the United States right now.
Okay, thank you. And the next question says, please speak about how you will address the concern of dairy farmers in our district vis-a-vis the tariff issue. And we're going to start with Patrick.
So the tariff issue across the northern border is dealing with the renegotiation of NAFTA. The country of Canada has tremendous support for their dairy farmers and tremendous subsidy, as well as supply quotas that ensure that they don't necessarily oversupply, though we are dealing with a global oversupply of milk right now, which is the reason that all milk prices now are somewhere around $15.50 per hundredweight. One of the challenges with the northern border is dealing with the new product of ultra-filtered milk, which for a period of time wasn't covered under the previous trade agreements. So it was getting across the border from New York and other states into Canada without having to pay a duty. This caused these dairy farmers to continue to produce the thing that didn't have the protection on it. And now Canada is putting a tariff on the ultra-filtered milk as well, at a time when New York dairy farmers have been increasing their overall production. So now again, there's an oversupply issue in the United States of the ultra-filtered milk because of that policy. We're certainly not going to solve this the way the president is doing, by making enemies of Justin Trudeau and the Canadians. We need to reform our system. That's why it's really disconcerting that there were some good things in the recent farm bill to help our dairy farmers, including a $9 level for the margin protection program, that got held up because the Republican parties wanted to kick more people off of food stamps. They held up helping dairy farmers because they wanted to take away food support from low-income people. Think about that for the Congresswoman representing the 21st Congressional District, which is first in the state in milk production and 15th in the country among all congressional districts.
Thank you. Dylan Radigan.
So no secret, milk is a terrible business. You have very little or no price control, you have a perishable product, and you have really no way to differentiate the product that you do have. You also have the foundation of all the cheese, yogurt, and ice cream in the entire Northeast corridor and the capacity to make all of that right now in New York 21. Canada, as a national policy, forever made a decision long ago that they want to protect their dairy farmers with a quota. It's a national policy. Rather than complaining about our single greatest trading partner, whose average tariff is less than 2% back and forth, who's a backbone of not only the upstate New York economy, but the stability of the entire North American economy, rather than complaining about a singular decision to protect what they see as a vital business, our opportunity in the dairy business is to help our dairy farmers more and more move away from milk pricing dependent business models into yogurt, cheese, ice cream, and dairy product dependent models that get better profit margins, have longer shelf lives, and can be distributed over greater distances. It's time to stop being a slave to the liquid milk price.
Katie Williams.
Wilson.
Wilson,
So
sorry.
what Dylan is talking about are value-added products, and they're incredibly important in business. It's something that is going to help not just dairy farmers, but farmers of all shapes and sizes throughout the North Country. It's what Emily was talking about with the Hub on the Hill. That is a place that allows people in a collective way, without having to foot the bill for creating a facility that has very high standards, to create value-added products. That's great. I certainly agree we do need to move away from an economy where farmers are stuck and trapped by price fixing. However, none of that does anything if we continue to piss off our northern neighbor. I mean, Plattsburgh is successful because it's been very specifically and strategically marketed as a suburb of Montreal. You can talk to Gary Douglas any day of the week, who's head of the chamber up there, and has essentially spearheaded that development. I think it's 80% of industry is tied to Quebec at this point, in Plattsburgh alone, maybe in Clinton County, I'm not sure the number exactly. But what we have to do here is create relationships and not break them down. You wake up and make enemies in politics. You have to work a lot harder to make friends. And what we see right now happening is exactly what people are so sick of across this country, is the mudslinging and the finger pointing and an inability to get anything done because he's worried about his re-election already. You know, this is what's happening right now. He's worried about keeping the base happy. I mean, we have to get beyond this and start helping people.
Thank you. Tedra Cobb.
Yeah. One of the first things that I did, well, I live in Dairyland, so in St. Lawrence County. So the district is interesting in terms of areas that have higher milk production and technology, or the Adirondack Park, it's just different. And so meeting with a dairy farmer to understand what is the impact for him. And as a moderate-sized dairy farmer, there are things that he needed, like the margin protection program. And so, you know, Patrick is right in terms of protecting our farmers with the margin protection program, and that this farm bill failed because of the SNAP. But also, it did, in some ways, help smaller farmers and larger farmers, but not necessarily some of those farms in the middle. So I think the other thing is, and I'm going to look at my notes because I actually prepared, if it's okay, to come in here with some notes because I'm not a farmer. Something called impact aid and new farm support legislation, and also getting back to that question of Canada and the, I guess, not the word isolationism, but protectionism, that Canada is protecting its own farmers, and part of that is our relationship with Canada and NAFTA. So I think it's a complicated problem. I am not a dairy expert, though I live in a dairy community, and so I see the impact, and I'm eager to understand it better. It's very complicated.
Emily Martz.
The first thing that I strove to do is to understand just the miserable state that dairy farmers are in right now. And I think that we first have to sit there and recognize that these are families who have been farming for generations. Many of them are a third generation farmer, dairy farmer. This is all they know. And I think that one thing we can do is understand, and to understand that they are the bedrocks of their communities. They buy many of their inputs from the communities in which they live. And they spend a lot of money right there in their communities. So if we don't take time to understand and to help our dairy farmers, we're going to lose more than our dairy industry. We're going to lose a lot of communities. And the ag bill wasn't perfect, but it is indeed unconscionable that it was held hostage by our incumbent and right-wing ideology, when what it was really trying to do is help people, dairy farmers and poor children alike. I support some specific measures like Senator Gillibrand's price floor. We need to take a serious look at that. And though this would happen gradually, it would take a lot of time, but I think it also is worth the time to look at regional co-ops to help our New York dairy farmers.
Thank you. Okay, Tedra Cobb would like to consider.
I'd like to follow up, because I don't think I did a very good job on that question, thinking about the future and what are opportunities. So I'd like to just talk about that for a minute. And that is, when we look at the region, we can see farms like Asgard Farms, we can see Kraft cheese, goat milk cheese, we can see the opportunities for value-added products. So I think there's a shift that we need to make when we think about dairy and how farming has changed. Obviously, farms have gotten larger, and so some, where I am, the smaller farms are being bought up. But one of the ways that we can keep those small farms is invest in their opportunities to create value-added products. And that's something that I've seen, and I think that that's an opportunity that we have in the future, because the price of milk is low, but the value-added products we've got in Johnstown, right, we've got Faye yogurt, so we've got lots of opportunities. We need to think creatively, invest in our farmers, and help them be entrepreneurs, because I think that that is an opportunity that we have and we don't want to miss.
Okay, I'm going to change the format just slightly for this next question, because I think you can answer it in 30 seconds. And the question from Hartford, New York is, will you all commit to support whichever candidate wins the primary 100%? So, each of you, will you commit to support whoever wins the primary? And the first person would be Dylan Raddick.
With pleasure, although I would like whoever's stealing my yard signs to bring them back.
Katie Wilson.
It's true, it's happening. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes dirty stuff going on, but I can say with full certainty that I will certainly support whoever the nominee is, and it's not us stealing your signs, but I think we all know who is.
Okay,
Yeah, the answer is yes, and if you've got signs, if anybody sees my signs from Watertown that have been taken, I don't know, maybe it's the Republicans, they're getting scared.
Absolutely, and that is why we're starting to put together a plan so that right after the election, we can all come together with all of our supporters, with all of the Democrats, all of you who have been so engaged in this process to help facilitate that transition so that we make sure that we win in November.
And Patrick? Patrick Nelson.
I have spent the last 4 years of my life trying to be Elise Stefanik. You can bet with 100% certainty that I am going to support full-throatedly whomever you select to be your nominee.
Okay, we are going to try to hold the applause. But the next question, and we'll start with Katie Wilson. Many see the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United as damaging to our democracy because it opened the floodgates to big money to corrupt our processes. Will reversing Citizens United be on your agenda?
Okay, so again, pragmatist. You know, I would love nothing more than to make my very first action be overturning Citizens United. But anyone familiar with process understands that that is a very hard thing to do and has to be ratified by the states, and it is not the kind of thing that we're going to pull off anytime soon, and this issue is too important to kick down the road another 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 20 years. So my proposal in dealing with campaign finance reform, which is a top priority of mine, I have a platform full of bread and butter issues, except this one. This one has been in there from the day I announced, and it's campaign finance reform. And what we have to do, or what I would propose to try to do in order to tackle this head on, is put a cap on how much you can spend in an election by the level of office being sought. So I'm going to throw out an arbitrary number. Let's say you could only spend $1 million in a congressional race. What that would mean is that the incumbent's war chest was mute. It wouldn't matter. She couldn't spend $5 million. She couldn't spend the $4 million she has in the bank. You'd be on a level playing field. It would create a scenario where almost anyone could play ball. It would also mean that you wouldn't have to have a conversation about term limits, because that war chest wouldn't be fueling this, you know, why do 90% of congressional representatives get reelected with only 10% support?
Did you
The
want to
people
use
would
your
decide.
red card?
I think I'm done.
Okay, Tedra Cobb.
There are 3 things. I do think that we need a constitutional amendment to undo Citizens United, and I am eager to work on that. The second is I do believe in term limits. The reason we talked about guns, money, power, and fear, that is what drives elected officials. We see it in Washington, and I do think we need structural changes. I do think that term limits are a good thing, and so I believe in them. And the last thing is that we need ethics reform. Congress people have an ethics law whereby they should not be able to go across the street and be lobbyists, but there are loopholes, and I will work to close those loopholes. Those are the 3 things that we can do structurally that would shift the power and the balance and give an opportunity to people who want to seek higher office. I think it would be great if we had limits, public financing of elections. That would be fantastic. That's another thing that is an opportunity. But for me, those 3 priorities, campaign finance reform, term limits, a constitutional amendment, meaning the campaign finance reform, those are structural things that I hope to work on should I be elected.
Thank you. Emily Martz.
When I first decided to run for Congress, I was told that if I couldn't raise $100,000 from my close friends and family, then I had no business running. And I said that is exactly why I should be running. This is a democracy, and you shouldn't have to buy your way into a democracy. There is too much money in politics. Imagine what we could do. Imagine how close we could be to Medicare for all if it were for the insurance companies' lobbyists. Imagine the gun safety reform that we could pass if it weren't for the NRA lobbyists. So in Congress, I will support legislation that picks away at that idea that corporations are people. And I will pass legislation that picks away at Citizens United until we can get it overturned. And I will support a public campaign finance bill. Until we get there, What we have is you. That's what we have to overcome this big money in politics. And you better believe that after the primary, the 30,000 national women that I've helped build a base with will come into play, and they will step up to the plate, along with a lot of other you inside this district, to make sure that we can go toe-to-toe with Elise's fundraising. But we will never be able to match it, and so what really matters is your engagement.
Thank you. Patrick Nelson.
So it's important to remember that Citizens United did not open the floodgates to massive amounts of money in our political system. Those gates were wide open well before 2010. Political action committees still existed, corporate political action committees still existed, there was dark money. The 55% of her war chest that Congresswoman Stefanik takes from corporate PACs is not affected by Citizens United. What Citizens United did was break the dam and allow untold sums of outside money being spent on behalf of campaigns to affect our political system. So yes, we need a constitutional amendment overturning that, but we need to go far, far, far further. But what I think we really need to do is create the strongest system of public campaign finance system available. We can look to the state of Maine for a lot of political reforms. They're voting with ranked choice for the first time in their primaries coming up. And they have a strong system of clean election funding where you get, on a race our size, about 1,000 people to give you $5 each. And then you qualify for public campaign financing up to the levels that Katie was talking about. So it's on creating that system, and then it is on you, the voters, to no longer vote for candidates that accept money from corporate political action committees or with a system of public campaign finance that take private money at all. But you have to decide that this corruption must end, and you must make it a thing that you vote on. This is why I don't take any money from corporate PACs and lobbyists. It's about not just in the campaigns, but when you get into office, when they come and try and buy your votes.
Thank you. Dylan Ratigan.
So when I left my job 10 years ago, after the financial crisis at CNBC, the reason why I left is because I realized that a corrupt economic system was being enabled by a political system. In the 3 years that I worked at MSNBC and then wrote Greedy Bastards, which was focused entirely on why we were not seeing any of the available solutions come to fruition, every single road you walk down led to money in politics. But money in politics is only as effective as the politician's ability to keep their job. And a politician's ability to keep their job is a direct reflection of how gerrymandered the district is. It was at that point that I realized that I had to dedicate as much of my political energy as possible to the issue of reform. We founded Get Money Out in 2011. It's a group of 250,000 that works to this day under the identity Represent.us to get redistricting passed in states across the country and to move to ranked choice voting. Universal donor caps is something that is advocated across the board. Citizens United is a great symbol for everything that is wrong with American campaign finance. But the attention that is paid to overturning it comes at the expense of the pressure that we need to all be applying to our Congress right now, who could pass legislation enforcing universal donor caps right now, regardless of what the Supreme Court says.
Katie Wilson would like to use her red card.
Yeah, I want to take a moment here because this happens a lot, where there is a yes-no answer, there's a flashpoint issue that is easy to campaign on and easy to get the heads in the room to nod about, say, yes, I want to overturn Citizens United. That is what I believe in doing. That is what I will work to do. But let's be real about what it takes to do that and what we can actually accomplish in order to make progress. Because it is true, the system is much more flawed than just this one issue. And the two options out there are publicly financed campaigns, which means there are matching contributions from the government for candidates to run. It varies in how much those funds are matched and up to what level, but that is the one other solution that's on the table, aside from what I've been proposing for the last year, which is to cap the amount of money you can spend, and then you don't need term limits. Let's be clear so that we actually understand what we're talking about. You don't need term limits if the incumbent doesn't have an advantage. So let's be honest with the options on the table, and let's be pragmatic about what we can and can't do, instead of campaigning on empty platitudes that are easy to get elected on and are part of this problem of the people in Washington who tell you what you want to hear, the people trying to go to Washington who tell you what you want to hear in order to get elected, and then get there and can't deliver on the goods. This is what we have to change. This is how we create trust and renew trust in our voting demographic. This is how we get real people into DC to negotiate and fight on our behalf and advocate for us.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to keep this going.
Are you using your red card?
I mean, that's why I did that, yeah.
Oh, I didn't see
So,
it.
I thought I saw it. The experience that we had with campaign finance reform, whether it's on donor caps, whether it's on public financing, whether it's on ranked choice voting, or for that matter, whether it's in campaign finance restrictions itself, we've only had really significant success at the state and city level. And all the work, whether it's in Founding Business for Democracy out in San Francisco that works on the gerrymandering issues there, whether it's what we did with Get Money Out, whether it's what we did with More Choice, More Voice in the campaign for ranked choice voting in Maine in 2016, it's important to understand that there's an incredible amount of value in focusing the reforms, whether it's ranked choice, campaign finance, or how you actually vote in the primaries in terms of who can participate on a city and state level, which is what we are seeing happen across this country in a very healthy way. And it's a prelude to the final reforms that will ultimately cascade across the federal government. Remember, water boils at 212 degrees. Each incremental bit of energy on the way to 212 has incredible value, and we are seeing that happen right now, and I've experienced it over the past decade with our efforts to do this exact thing.
Thank you. Emily Martz wants to use her red card.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I was clear and expand upon one point that I made, which is the part about you and the part about the engagement, which clearly you are if you are here today. And so I ask you, as you leave tonight, to think about 5 people whom you know who are not yet engaged. And you know what matters to them. You know how the policies coming down the pipeline are negatively affecting those things that matter. And I would ask that you start a conversation with them, so that by the time the primary is over, if not before, those 5 people are fully engaged, so that they begin doing exactly what you are doing. And then they go out and they find their 5 people, because that's the way it works. And if we can continue to build this base, then that is what we are going to have as our biggest weapon against Elise Stefanik in November. So I have confidence that from everyone in this room, from everyone across the district, we absolutely have at our fingertips what it takes to win against the big money in politics in November.
Okay. We are now going to move to the closing statements, and we're going to go in the same order that we started the opening statements. Oh, okay, Patrick's gonna use his last before we
Can't use
go.
it on a closing statement, so wouldn't
No,
want to
you
be a
can't.
politician that lets time to speak go to expire. Does everybody know what ranked choice voting is? So for those of you who don't, this is something that I think is sorely needed, especially in the 21st Congressional District, where not with us today is a representative of the Green Party, which has a very strong presence here in the 21st District. Now, most of our ideals, my ideals, and the ideals of members of the Green Party align almost 100%. But we have a campaign system that forces us to become enemies that compete for the same pool of voters instead of working together to tackle Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. What ranked choice voting allows you to do is we capture more of what you want from your government. You get to rank who you want number 1, Patrick Nelson. Who you want second, and then probably throw out that 3rd place vote, because I don't think anyone here is voting for the Congresswoman. And then if your first choice is the lowest vote getter, your vote moves to the 2nd person. So we find a consensus candidate. We find a consensus representative. And never again in the United States will somebody get elected without the approval of more than 50% of the people they're supposed to serve. That's what ranked choice voting means. It means getting to a majority. And we should have that nationally so that you get to tell your government more about what it is you want it to do.
Any more red cards before we start the closing statements? Okay. Tedra Cobb.
I want to say thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. This is the last forum of this format. Tomorrow, it's live on TV. This has been a long journey. I announced in July that I wanted to run to represent you and all of us in Congress. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. When I tell you that as a legislator I was accountable and accessible, the only way you know that is by looking at my record and by when I was unopposed. And so I want you to take time. I ask that you look at my record and I ask that you get to know me in the next couple of weeks if you haven't. I want to just ask one question really quickly. How many of you were not engaged before the last year? How many of you were not engaged in some indivisible group or something like that before the last year? All right. Now, you're here. You're engaged. So many people still are not. And we've got to get them engaged. And that's what this has been about. I ask for your vote in the primary, and I thank you again for the honor of being here.
Thank you. Martz.
I'm running for Congress to listen to your stories. There's a young mother in Argyle whose son has a disability that restricts his capacity to speak. There is a program available only over the internet that would allow him to communicate with his family. But unfortunately, given the restrictions of broadband in our district, he is unable to communicate and speak with his family in their own home. And these stories are falling on deaf ears in Washington. I have been traveling around the district, over 40,000 miles, listening to you, to the family who had to decide between health care and financial bankruptcy, the teacher who sends her children home with food to make sure that they have something to eat. These are the stories that matter to me, and these are the stories that I will take to Washington. I'm Emily Martz, and I ask for your vote on June 26th.
Thank you.
My name is Patrick Nelson. I'm 28 years old. I'm from a middle-class family in a town called Stillwater, New York. I'm a product of public schools here in the 21st Congressional District. And on June 26th, my name is going to be on the ballot for the United States House of Representatives. I am humbled by the responsibility that I have the opportunity to possess. It was in Saranac Lake well over a year ago when a mother of 2 Marines on active duty looked me in the eyes and said she would be proud to cast her vote for me. And I went home and cried, because the weight of the responsibility that this woman was trusting with me rests upon my shoulders. I want to rise to that responsibility. I want to do everything in my power to be the best representative that I can possibly be, and the one that you deserve. And I'm asking for your support on June 26th so that I can go do just that.
Thank you very much. Dylan Ratigan.
The risk to our country right now is the highest it's ever been. Donald J. Trump is the President of the United States of America. This is not a normal political time. And the illusion of selecting for people who should make you feel a certain way or have certain values that you share is no longer sufficient in and of itself to defend this country. Our Congress must be recaptured not only by the Democratic Party, but leadership must emerge inside of the Democratic Party that can consistently and reliably defend the values of this country from those who would prey upon it, and have the courage to represent and harness the expertise to execute, to reform our political and economic system in a way that works for all of us. It's why I'm running for Congress.
Katie Wilson.
Thank you to everyone who's still awake and still here. It is an honor to be up on the stage and to be part of a group of candidates that I hear over and over again. People say they wish they could just roll into one and we'd have the perfect representative or the perfect person to beat Stefanik. But that's the thing. Only one person is going to go up against her in November. And right now, as important as it is to have these conversations about the issues, the only thing that matters is taking the seat back for the reasons that Dylan described and we've been talking about all night. And this is why I have to reiterate that we're already winning. The strategy that we've had in place for a year is still the strategy we have 2 weeks out, and it's a strategy that wins in November as well. It's a strategy that includes 1 in 5 of the people working on this campaign are already voters across the aisle in November. We need someone who can relate and talk the talk and walk the walk of the average person in this district, who people can trust, who people can vote for in November, not who's just winning a beauty pageant amongst Democrats. That's why I ask for your vote, so that we can take Elise Stefanik on November 7th.
Okay, thank you in the audience for demonstrating your civic concern by attending this event. Thank you to all of the candidates for coming. Candidate literature and league membership information and our upcoming events, literature from the tables in the back. And of course, not only should you go and vote in the primary on Tuesday, June 26th, but you should find somebody else to go with you. People vote when they know that somebody else that they know is going to vote and thinks it's important. So good night and good luck.